Welcome to how to develop HTML5 web applications using Visual.net and jQuery. My name is Dror and I will be presenting this. Alright, so today I'm going to talk about a few things. We are going to talk about the pains of Datacentric rich internet application development. Then I'm going to talk about the Visual WebGui approach, which answers these pains. Then I'm going to show you a little demo of the basic development with Visual Studio. I'm going to continue by talking about HTML5 and jQuery and how they fit into Visual WebGui. And I'm going to show you the jQuery demo. Following that, I will be discussing some Visual WebGui products and the roadmap. And then hopefully we'll have time for questions. So the pains of data-centric rich internet applications. Development of rich internet applications, and as you know, especially those who are data-centric, is very complex and it's a sensitive thing. The business needs alone provide vast challenges, from the complex data binding to the state management and high interactivity that we want to have, and up to the security aspect, which is one of the most important things. If you add the rich UI considerations into all that mix, it can seem almost impossible. So I'm just going to break it down to a few points that I've written here. Ajax connectivity. If we're speaking of this type of applications, which is rich and data-centric, we're necessarily talking about Ajax. And as the premier methodology for dealing with asynchronous communication issues, Ajax is a necessary part of this type of applications. However, Ajax has some major limitations. First of all, it does require complex programming. It's an extremely complex development technique, and you have to be very precise and you have to be very delicate, and it consumes a lot of time and energy. It also relies heavily on the controls speaking to other controls, as you know, and they do that independently, and that affects your bandwidth, not in a good way. And it also means that each control is acting independently. It's more difficult to secure. Second thing I want to talk about is data binding. Binding client-side control to server-side data, it requires special programming on our part as the developers. And not only it takes skills, but it also involves transferring data to the client and sometimes even performing business logic on it. That not only increases the bandwidth, of course, but it also raises security concerns, because if you're transferring data to the client, it becomes vulnerable. When you transfer data to the client, the web interfaces are bound to the data sources, and because of the client side, what we call open endpoints, this is a vulnerable thing and open to hacking. The third thing I want to talk about is state management. A major part of any web application development process, as you know, is to decide, we want to decide whether we want to keep the state of a particular control or function. And we also need to write explicit code for each element based on the decision. And the common thing around the world is that web applications are stateless or partially stateful, which is almost always mostly stateless. And the Visual WebGui approach is the other way, and I'm going to talk about it in a minute. Now, if you want to choose stateful solutions, they come with two main concerns. The first one is scalability, as you know. Scalability and stateful, we were taught it doesn't go together. And stateful solutions are considered heavy on the server memory. That's why it prevents us from working with completely dynamic load balancing solutions or web server farms. The second concern is the concurrent users issue, which is very limited because of the server memory usage if you are stateful. So Visual WebGui does answer these concerns, and I'll be talking about this in a second. The Visual WebGui approach. I'm just going to answer the points that I've mentioned before, and we'll go by that. So we're talking about Ajax. With Visual WebGui, you get a development platform that provides built-in Ajax. Visual WebGui, with its Ajax connectivity management, actually enables the application itself, not just the control, but the whole application to speak directly to the server asynchronously. So basically what you get is an application level Ajax and not just the control level. Plus it's completely abstracted, so you don't have to give it any thought. I mean, it allows us, the developers, you can enjoy the benefits of Ajax with minimal know-how. I don't have to know how to do Ajax. I can just use Visual WebGui, and I'm going to show you that in the demo quite soon. I should mention that if I want to handle code on the business logic and the client side, I can. I mean, I don't have to just rely on the server side, although this is the best practice by Visual WebGui. But if you want to handle code on the client side, of course, you can do that. The Visual WebGui Ajax connectivity is optimized, and it's optimized by two major practices. One, it communicates only the differences, only the delta of the UI is sent back and forth, and only the UI changes are sent and rendered. And two, it does this in batches. Thus, it's freeing up the bandwidth. I mean, if an event is not critical, it enters into a queue of events which are uploaded each time we are registered to an event or have defined any event as critical. Also, Visual WebGui keeps all the information and business logic on the server, and this means that the application is completely secured by design, so you don't have this security concern, and the client only gets the information requested, and that's it. Data binding. As I mentioned before, data binding is a complex issue, but Visual WebGui enables us to create rich UIs without the need to write any client or server code for the data binding. With Visual WebGui, I can connect to the UI during the desktop development process. The development paradigm with the Visual WebGui is a Visual.net paradigm, and you're going to see that in a bit. And during that process, I can bind to data and manage. The process of the data binding is done by using simple point and click. You will see that. It's just like desktop development paradigm. Empowered by the full power of .NET, you get all the rich libraries of .NET, the rich data libraries, and you get object-oriented code. You don't have to mess with the client side. And you utilize all the data-enhanced libraries such as LinkU, Entity Framework, and others. So this way, your application is also inherently more secure. All data bindings and data manipulations are performed exclusively on the server, and the client is brought only what's currently visual on the screen. The data is virtualized to the browser, and the client side doesn't hold any tables or anything like that. It's obviously dramatically affects the bandwidth because you don't send all the data as well. So I'm just going to talk about state management. We talked about two concerns, and I'm going to address them now. Visual WebGui actually handles this issue by keeping a floating state. This means that you store the state in a database or other type of state cache. And moreover, we highly optimize the state memory usage down to, I think, less than 10% of the full state size. And this makes a huge difference, makes the memory usage very low, and it enables the user to be directed by load balancing solutions, whatever you choose, to different servers dynamically, and it's very, very efficient. And the optimization to the state is done by two principles. One, only the differences from the default are saved. This is by a property store. The principle is that if you have a control that has, say, 50 properties that define it, that includes anchoring, size, check state, if it has a check state. If you're talking about data grid, for instance, so you have something like 200 or 300 properties, and the average user, our developer, actually uses very, very little of this. So we do keep in a property store all the default values and take the values from there. But whatever values that are not the default, which will change applicatively, we take from the state and we keep in the state. So that's why it's less than 10%. It's very, very small. And we've also done some optimizations on the serialization mechanism. For instance, we've written code to optimize it, such as if you want to serialize, say, tree view, which is a control which has hierarchies, and it's a very big thing to dump into the state cache if you just want to serialize it like that. So we have made some optimizations on that to flatten the tree and only then serialize the state. As to enabling the concurrent users, because of the minimal memory usage of these optimizations, the memory usage on the server is very, very low. So Visual WebGui stateful solution can enable more than 800 concurrent users, and if you compare it to ASP.NET, Microsoft recommended that it's capable of handling 200 to 400. So that's a big difference. Now I want to say a word about security. As the Ajax applications, the rich applications, become most vulnerable elements of the enterprise IT, the businesses, have to find ways to secure these web applications and protect the sensitive data and keep the rich UI. And this has been a very, very big concern because you either go thin on the UI and more secure usually, or you build rich UIs, but then you expose yourself to hacking and so forth. The model of Visual WebGui is an empty client model. That means that all code runs on the server, all the business logic, all the code, all the data handling, everything, and the data sent to the client is just a virtualization of the actual data on the server. And this means the client doesn't know anything except what he gets in the XML to display. And I should mention at this point that Gizmox, that's the company behind Visual WebGui, had in the past published a hacking challenge. We invited the developers of the world, and we offered a $10,000 reward to anyone who could hack Visual WebGui. And it ran for a few months, and Visual WebGui's empty client architecture was proven bulletproof, so it wasn't hacked. Now I'm just going to go to a demo and show you that. So just going to exit here. Just going to stop, see if you have any questions. I prefer a question will be asked in the end. We'll have time for questions. So you can write them down, or you can write them down to the webinar interface throughout the webinar, and I will address them at the end. So just going to go to my Visual Studio, and I'm going to create a Visual WebGui application. Okay, just this. Yes, it should go away. Let's put it here. All right. So as you see here, it's a web application. If you work with Visual Studio, you should know the structure. But you see here is a form and not a page like in ASP.NET. But Visual WebGui is ASP.NET based. So I have my application here. And I'm just going to open my designer and start putting some controls. And I'll try to touch some of the subjects we've been discussing. All right, so this is my form. I'm just going to stretch this. And I'm just going to start dragging some controls. Let's put the toolbox here. And all right, so for my structure, I would like to have a split container right here. So just drag it here. And I'm going to drag a list view control. And I'll show you the data binding process in a minute. I'm just going to dock the list view to the top. And you can see everything is point and click, very, very easy. This is my list view. And let's handle the data source. So I'll just go to my data source, and you can see the data binding is done just like in desktop. And all right, so I'm gonna define a connection string through SQL, and just choose a server. It's just gonna take a minute. I'm sorry. The big advantage of this is that you don't have to deal with practices which are dangerous or complex. So just going to choose Northwind. All right, this is the database. And here we go. So, oh yeah, I have to just choose a table. So I'm going to choose the customers table. And that's it. I'm data bound. The list view is data bound. And now I can just throw a couple more controls here. Say I'm going to drag a splitter so I can move my list view. Just going to dock my splitter to the top as well. And I'm going to set the back color. If you can see, this is the most simple web development I've had before I met Visual WebGui. So now I'm just going to drag a property grid right here in the second panel. I'm going to dock it to fill. And I'm going to set the selected object of the property grid to my list view. So choose my list view, and here you can see all the properties. Now I'm just going to go to my split container and set the splitter distance, say to 750, just like that. And I want to drag a few more controls over here so you can see that. So I'm going to drag a button. And I can do it whatever I want with my button, can give it any shape that I want. And I'm going to drag a checkbox, and I'm going to drag a label. All right. So what I'm going to do now, let's change the font of the label just for fun. Go my font dialog, and I'm going to make it less like this. All right. So let's go. Oh, I have to bind to start to fill my list view, so I'm just going to go to my form right here. Sorry. Okay. Just go my form. Oh, I have to go through here. It's better. You can see all the events that I have connected to my form. These are all the handlers that I have. That's a lot of events. It's a very rich event based compared to regular web. So on my form load, it's just going to fill my list view. So I'm going to say data. Just a second. That's customers table adapter. I'm going to fill it with my Northwind customers. Here we go. Let's see it, it's built. Cool. So I'm just going to select my start form right here and run it. And as you can see in my browser, this is my application. You can see my list view here, data bound, that easily. Very simple. That's my splitter. I can just drag this. And yes, you can see the position of the controls here is compared to this panel. So I haven't chosen that well, but I can do this. Say let's go fix it. Say I want to dock all these. Oh, anchor them. Let's anchor them to the bottom and not to the top. That's right. So just going to build and refresh my browser. And as you can see, they're right here, unaffected. And you can see here my list view. Very simple. I can control my list view to my property grid right here. Say I want to change the font. So I can just go bold. And you can see everything has changed. And you've seen the speed. The speed is very, very high. So that easily I can data bind, and everything is managed on the server. And let's see some Ajax. All right. So I'm going to do a few things now. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to choose my list view and go to events and go to select index changed. And here I'm going to set the text of my label. So I'm going to say this label dot text will be my list view. Sorry, list view items, and I'm going to give it my list view selected index dot text. All right. And another thing I want to show you here, you can see in the properties window of the project we have extra tabs here. These are Visual WebGui tabs, And we have extra switches here. You can enable shortcuts or a debugger, which I'm going to show you now. You can change the private version, and you can handle other aspects of the deployment here. This actually is just a shortcut for the web config file, and every action here is serialized into the web config file. So I'm just going to refresh, and I will do this. As you can see here on my label right here, I'm just going to do this. You can see this is the selected item on the list view. So if I'm going to select another one, automatically the label changes. And you can see on the bottom, right here in the debugger window, when I hit it, you can see the request and the response. I'm just going to clear this, and let's check one. So I'm just going to click this, and actually that was a back and forth run to the server. This was Ajax. Since I've registered for the handler, I went to the server and set this text, and you can see my request here is a selection change for the list view, and for my response, this is an XML. We only render the label. That's L represents the label, and we actually re-render the label, and that is it. So that's the Ajax aspect. So that's enough, I think, for this demo, and I want to continue my presentation now. So, bringing HTML5 and jQuery to Visual.net. HTML5 brings the promise of, new generation native cross-platform web applications, and it brings a lot of cool stuff, and that's without plugins or anything. It has a broad browser support, and it's considered by many likely to replace Silverlight and even Flash. So Visual WebGui actually allows us to develop in Visual.net with the richness of .NET libraries and incorporate HTML5 custom client customizations. And Visual WebGui bridges between the two. It gives you the power of .NET and allows you to have the power of HTML5 in your web applications. And this through abstracting away all the JavaScript and HTML5 functionality with jQuery, and the complexities of Ajax connections and database connectivity is abstracted. Data binding, you don't have to mess with all that stuff. So I'm just going to show you a little bit in a minute, just a demo, how to incorporate jQuery implementation, HTML5 with CSS3 with a skinnable controls. The customization of Visual WebGui controls is enabled by skinning mechanism, which actually means you can extend any control that you want, not just on the server, but you can inherit and extend its client implementation. And all the client-side resources are overridable. You can override images, you can override CSS files, scripts, templates, and so on and so forth. So let's go to our demo. Yes, okay, I have the links here. I'm just going to paste them for you. Okay, just going to put all this. I'm going to put this in the chat box for you all to go to. This is an example of where we can go. Just going to go to my browser and just do this here. Okay. So this is mail application, web application. It's based on a web implementation of the Outlook, but you can see emails right here are not represented like here in a list view. They are represented in this implementation that involves transition and movements, and this is done by a jQuery implementation I'm going to show you in a bit. I can also go with my keyboard up, down, home, and all right. So let's see how it's done. I have here a web application. Excuse me. This is a Web GUI application, and I'm just going to show you a little bit. First, I want to show you the original implementations. Just a second, please. All right, so I have it here. This is an HTML implementation. It has nothing to do with Visual WebGui application. It's just HTML, but it involves the same mechanism, which I'm going to show you in a minute. I'm just going to give you a URL for this as well. Just a second, please. I have this somewhere right here. Okay. So just going to put this in the chat box as well, and you can surf to it. So just drag these sources so you can see them into my studio. Okay, so basically this is jQuery code from the jQuery extension, and this example was taken from the web and manipulated by us, and we do have the copyright for this written here. Nothing is stolen. So I'm just going to show you one by one. This is the HTML, basic HTML, which we've seen in the browser right here. What you have here is basically a div containing all the pages, all the divs, and just containing one includes an image, one includes a table. You can see an iframe right here, and span objects of sorts. Now let's see the CSS file. It's pretty basic. It includes classes for the slides, for numbers, and it includes directions for specific browsers. You can see WebKit, Mozilla, Opera, or Microsoft. And let's review the JavaScript file. These are the functions that define the transitions. Basically, jQuery functions define the skew action, the scale, because the scale changes. I'm going to go back to my original sample. You can see here how this div, say number 9, is a little skewed and it's a little smaller, and this is achieved by this script. And you can see an initialization. This is the slide scales. It's hard-coded. This example, I should say, is it's a little dirty. All right, I've written it. It didn't take a lot of time on it. And initialization of the center and all kind of parameters here defined. Click events, key down events, and registering. And at the bottom, I am evaluating the direction of the key code. If I go with up or left keys, or down and right, home and end. And it's very, very basic. It has nothing to do with Visual WebGui. So how do I incorporate it in Visual WebGui? I'm just going to close these. And I have here my project, like you've seen before. It's very similar to the other one. And you will notice that except my form here, I have 3 other items here and a folder. Of course, in my folder, I have the CSS and the JavaScript file. It's the same one, untouched, just incorporated. And I have here a content flow control. This is basically the carousel object. And we've chosen to inherit from tab control. This is the Visual WebGui tab control. So I can have similar properties, so I can override them. And parallel to the tab page, I have the content flow item. It inherits from tab pages. And you can see it overrides only one property, which is, it's actually a method which says should render content. Because if I use a tab control, like here in my studio, the tab behind is hidden. So in my carousel, I want to show all of them all the time. So this is the only override here. And if I look here, I have a few more overrides. First, I render height and width of every item. That's one override. The other one, I render all my tab pages. And here, just a cast to my content flow item collection. And it's very basic. Should serialize, anti-size, and this is it. So this is what I've done. Just adjusted everything. And I have another item here. It's a content flow skin. You can see it here as well. Every control in Visual WebGui can have a skin. And once you have a skin of it, I can open the skin in the designer. And you see all the client resources for this control right here. You can see images. You can see style sheets. None, because it uses its fathers. Scripts, and you can see here the content flow jQuery. jQuery is just going to say a word about this. jQuery is jQuery templates. It's a jQuery project that Gizmox has written. You can find it in the jQuery project on the web. It's open source, and it comes to replace the XSLT mechanism which we've been using up until now, and it gives you better performance, and it gives you broader browser support as Visual WebGui moves into mobile web applications, and it's much more efficient. Basically, it is generated from XSLT at the moment, and if you want to see how it looks like, just double click, and you can see just like in XSLT you have a match, so you have a registered template, you can see a match for the tag. Just going to go here, and you can see here there's a meta tag, and register for that, and just build the HTML from this. So you can see here our overridden script, and I can override HTML. And I can override images. You see these are images of tab control, say the tab header close or anything like that. Or all these ones are for the treer, for the tab header. So this is done by doing this. I'm just going to close this, and I'm just going to run my form. So you can see that on my form I have a tab control or a content flow control, and these are actually the pages. So basically you can see here each one is a panel with as much control as I want. I have full functionality for each control. And I can even do this from here, so I can just press this button here. And just because transitions aren't supported as much as in Chrome with other browsers, I've chosen to show you in Chrome, but you can use other browsers as well. But I suggest that if you want to look at this kind of demo, you should browse in Chrome. And this is the result. So basically, if I open my form, you can see here I have a tab control. It's a content flow control. If I go here, you can see content flow. But you don't know it inherits from the tab control. And I can just design it like this. And if you want to see data binding with Ajax and with jQuery, I can just go to my tab pages. I can add another one, content flow item. And in my content flow item, I can just do what I've done before, which is basically I can drag a list view and just dock it to fill, set the data source just like before. Just going to choose a table. Customers was good for us, right? And yeah, now it's just going to choose this, the load event of the form. So this is form 1. Go load. I'm going to fill this. Just going to take this line from here because I have it already. Sorry, this one. And it should be the same name and everything. Let's see if it builds. I think it does. So just when I build, I go to my browser and I hit refresh. And just going to remove with my keyboard right here. Up, you see my list view right here. It's data bound. Everything was very, very simple. Now I want to say a word about huge data. We don't consider it a good practice to send a lot of data, because web is not like desktop, and you want to send a lot of data. But if you do want to use a lot of data, and we do have a virtual data grid, which is a custom data grid. You can send, say, if you want to use 5,000 rows on 20 columns, you don't want to render everything at once because the browser would get stuck. So we do have a virtual data grid, which means as you scroll down, the data is generated. And for the list view, I don't have to use scrolling. I can use something much more webby, which is, I'll just go my list view, which is paging. So I'm just going to choose here, use internal paging. I said true. Save. I'm going to build this and go and hit refresh. And just go hit end. And you can see, oh, sorry for this. This was, just a second, please. Okay. Yeah, for some reason, I think I made a mistake with this. Let's see if I go here, I have my list view here, and you can see my list view right here. If I go to use internal paging right here, say this one, it's going to hit true, and you can see my list view now has paging. I can browse through first page, last page. You can see how fast it is. That's how fast Visual WebGui is. So that's about that. So just like I've implemented this carousel, we've implemented this in the mail demo, which in this case means that HTML page is rendered here with the content of the email. So this was it. And just going to go back to my presentation, and I want to talk about the roadmap for a little bit. And in the next few months, Visual WebGui moves to fully support HTML, Datacentric HTML5 applications. So later this year, you can see fully integrated components with complete jQuery extension capabilities, broader browser mobile support, and it gives you better performance. And the integrated Visual WebGui HTML5 components will come later this year. First beta is out already. The official release will be in Q4 2011. And Professional Studio WinWeb, that's our basic professional studio for data-centric web cloud applications. Visual.net simplicity, and you get productivity. You've seen how fast it is and how fast it is to develop without concerning yourself with Ajax or with security or with data binding. You get cross-browser accessibility, i.e. Mozilla, Firefox, Google Chrome, Opera, Netscape, Safari. You get easy look and feel customizations. I don't know if you've seen this. Just going to go back here. You can see the button here. You can see how reactive it is. It's not a flat button. It has a few states. These are just three, like focused, unfocused, press style, mouse over style. You have a disabled style. There's 5 different looks, and this is achieved by a 9er. So if I go to see the images that comprise this button, you can see it's on like 50 images because it's like 9 for each state. Very good, and I can change everything about the button that I want to see. So that's another thing that you're getting. Second here, please. All right. Officially, this was released in December 2010. It's currently our official release. Very, very stable and easy to use. And Instant CloudMove. In the Instant CloudMove arena, this we're talking about migration from legacy client server to the web or cloud. And we have a few tools that are in development right now, and a few of them are out there already. So Visual WebGui offers various lines of legacy migration. You have an assessment tool for Windows Forms that's available on the site. You can just go to www.visualwebgui.com/CloudMove. It's going to give you the just go see on the website. If you want to assess the migration for VB6 or Oracle or COBOL with the help of Micro Focus Net Express, you just contact us. It's available as a service. As for the transposition tool, the assessment tool is available for download, as I've said, for WinForms, and for VB6 it will be next month, this June 2011. You can have an assessment tool for VB6. As for the transposition tool, it's an automated migration, fully automated, and released as follows. It's available as a service right now, but first beta will come out in 2 months, and by Q4 2011, the release should be here. Okay, I want to talk about mobile. I want to show you, this is a desktop Outlook. Most of you know it. And Visual WebGui is ready to take the next step towards mobile-oriented development. You can see here, this is a there's a web implementation that we've done from this Outlook. I can show you, you can browse to this URL. I'm going to give you that in the checkbox in a minute. It's a full web implementation of the Outlook. It took one of our developers about a little over a month to develop, which is really not a lot for this size of application. I'm just going to give you the URL in a minute. And from the same code base of this application, for a different platform, you can have the same for mobile. Yes, it is. It has been quite simple. And I'm just going to show you that online. So what I'm going to do now, just going to go here, take this URL, and I'm going to put this in the chat box for you guys so you can browse. But be sure, this is just a sneak peek of what's to come. So the supported devices are iPhone, iPad, or Android. You can also browse with Chrome. They do have a nice emulator for this. And just going to show you, this is the WebMy application that I told you about. It's a web implementation of the Outlook. Just going to put this URL as well. And just going to put the username, the login information. So the user is Itzik, and password is 12345. So you can log in. This is the URL. And you can see here it is functional. You have all the menus and everything. You can see pop-up menus here as well, open, print, reply. And you can see here the dialog opening. The first time that a Visual WebGui application loads, it takes a few seconds because it downloads the kernel of the client resources. It's about 250K. And the images, if you they're saved in temporary files. So the first time a dialog comes up. And you can see here the theme here is like Microsoft Office 2010. You can see the dialog is partly transparent. And for the mobile, just gonna log in here. And you can see this for the mobile. Let's say I'm going to go in my inbox. And you can see my emails right here. And if you want to browse from your mobile devices, you do have all the gestures and transitions. You can pinch, you can swipe, and like that. So this is a nice sneak peek. And how is it done? What we've done here is basically designed the UI. It's going to go back here. Right here. We've designed the UI and a few controls to look like more like a mobile. If you want, you can browse to a regular Visual WebGui application through your mobile. You can do that, but it's not meant for the mobile, so you can see all the it's a too small a screen for a web application, regular one. But if you want to look more like mobile, we designed a few controls like that. We defined the mobile stream, which is basically the transitions. Define the form factors. It's the size of each of the form, depending on the controls or the device. And all these are supported in this demo. The mobile streaming capabilities. This is the way you basically bind the form parts to the mobile flow control, and thus you can enable the whole effect. What you do is just take a few screen parts, and through a mobile streamer you bind these into a flow. And you can see you can have the look and feel of every device that you want. The greatest thing I've mentioned before, the architecture of Visual WebGui, is that you can, from the same code base, because everything runs on the server, you can deploy to various platforms or devices, and it's really unrelated. You don't have to change your code. Just gonna, if you want, you can adjust the client customization. So a roadmap for mobile. So Visual WebGui framework, mobile enabled, is the first beta is already released, and the official release will be in Q4 this year. And Visual WebGui mobile framework, that will be a designated framework, on contrary to the other one. The first one is basically our core SDK, which supports mobile, and more suitable right now maybe for tablet. And the Visual WebGui mobile framework is a full control subsetting designated for mobile and designated mobile controls. You get all the gestures, get client awareness. So this is it. And now I have time for your questions. And just going over the questions, and I will answer them in a minute. Thank you. Going over all your questions about the starting time, and I want to apologize for a second time. We did have technical issues, which forced me to go to another computer and set it up. So that's why we began late. So again, I'm sorry. I'm just going to answer the questions very, very soon. Okay. So I have a question here, which is how many customers do you have? And currently, we have a large community of over 40,000 developers around the world, and at least 200,000 are using the products. And currently there's around 35,000 Visual WebGui applications in production, and we estimate about twice as much in development. So I hope this answers your question. All right, second question is this product a plugin Visual Studio Tools? Visual WebGui does include Visual Studio integration package. What you get with this is full integration into Studio and Visual Studio templates. This includes application templates and library templates and Windows Azure templates. And as well as it gives you the capabilities that I've shown you using the property pages, easy registering things in the web config file, and extra things for that, adding Visual WebGui items, and so on and so forth. So, third question, is VB.NET supported like C#? Of course, you can develop with .NET as you would develop otherwise. You can develop with C#, VB.NET, whatever is comfortable for you. Specifically, our sources are written in C#, and I should mention, I haven't mentioned this before, but most of Visual WebGui code is open source. You can download it, and you can also download it a media that includes all the sources, so that you can learn from the sources, you can extend them, and so on and so forth. All right, so okay, so I see a question here. I'm not a professional programming, but this implement MVC approach. Yes, of course. The price of Visual WebGui, you can see our prices on our website. Just go to the download page. Visual WebGui website is very, very rich. I recommend everyone to go there. It includes not only our products and pricing, but a large knowledge base and a large web application demonstrating the framework. There's a large articles base, and you can see we have a large forum, very, very active. Visual WebGui has grown with its forum, and we are very, very attentive. And you can see here there are a lot of questions, a lot of researchers, a lot of people have done some very interesting stuff. So I recommend everyone to go there. And of course, if you want to see how much it costs. So HTML5, yes, how to future-proof. So Visual HTML5 right now, it's growing more and more in the market, and you can see it everywhere. So our money is in there. We will put our money in there. And the great thing about HTML5 for us, as opposed to Silverlight, as we see it, Silverlight you do have to install a plugin, and this is totally without one, which is like Visual WebGui. You get incredible richness of applications, and the end user does not have to install anything into his browser, and can access from anywhere on any browser. All right, so why do we have to select Visual WebGui products for mobile? From the same reasons that I've mentioned before, I'm just going to emphasize them. Development of web applications for mobile usually are designated for mobile. With Visual WebGui, you can develop a web application and deploy it to various platforms, various devices. From the same code base, you can develop once and deploy anywhere. This is a major part of Visual WebGui's strength. Plus, that with our jQuery implementation of the client-side core of the rendering, we do give you very broad support. So I hope this answers your question. Very good one. How does it handle multimodal input-output? Basically, the client serves the client side with Visual WebGui serves as an input and output device, and that's it. What you see is a virtualization of the data, and it serves as an input device from the client side. Every multiprocessing, multi-threading is handled via standard .NET libraries. So I can see here about MVC, I've answered this. All right. Okay, have you ever thought to make it open source? I've answered this. Visual WebGui is open source, except for a few private libraries, but all the control libraries are open source, and you can learn a lot from them and extend them. Any books, tutorials for Visual WebGui? Visual WebGui, as I've mentioned, has a rich knowledge base on site. We do have a wiki site as well, and it's currently more and more in development. It's very rich as it is, with videos, tutorials, webcasts, articles, and we don't have any books. But you can browse through our companion kit. I'm just going to go browse now just to show you. The companion kit is, just going to take this. It's a web application, very rich one, that demonstrates the usage of Visual WebGui, complete with code for download. Just going to go here through my website. And as you can see here in the URL, it's WGX, it's a Visual WebGui URL. And this is a web application. So if I want to learn, say, about list view, I could just click here and go to list view and see all my findings here and go to my list view control. And here I can explore my features, performance issues. And this is a real sample. And you can see the code right here. You can also open it. You can download it or anything else you want to do with it. So these are the learning resources that you can use. All right. Just a second. Okay. Can we download your presentation? In the next few days, we can upload the presentation, or either we will send on demand if anyone wants to see the presentation. So there's no problem. We will be in touch with you after this webinar, with you all via mail, and see how we can help you better. What does it mean virtualized? Do you mean that is an image that is being shown? No, virtualized I mean that there's no, if I present data such as a table or any data that I render to the HTML, I don't really send all the data to the client. I just send whatever is displayed in the HTML. The HTML is built, it's not an image. We do have different HTML elements. Sometimes it's iframes, sometimes it's divs, tables, and so on and so forth. What I meant is that you have a complex application state on the server, and we just send the UI representation of that state. The client is not at all aware that it's an application and it has logic or anything like that. It serves just as a platform to draw your application. That's why it's so fast, and that's why it's so secure, because the client doesn't know anything. It just renders just UI. What path to follow if application needs 2,000 users, say 600 transactions per second? As I've mentioned before, if we're talking about concurrent users, for common usage of data-centric applications, 600 concurrent users is very much possible with Visual WebGui. And by the way, you don't get that with regular ASP.NET. But I would, for specific scenarios, I would consult either us or through our forums, because people have very much experience there. But if you want to have a server farm for multiple users, so the count is about a few hundreds per server, per concurrent users. 600 sounds okay. Does Visual WebGui support VB? So I've answered this. If it's VB.NET, then of course VB.NET code is valid as it is. It's IL. It doesn't matter what language you're writing in. The assembly is the same. If you're talking about VB6, I've mentioned this in the CloudMove when I spoke of CloudMove. If you want to assess VB6 migration, you can contact us. And for assessment, you'll be seeing the first beta, I think, in a month. You can see the presentation. And other than that, we do move in that direction. We're already active in that arena. Does it handle speech input? Basically, if you want to use controls, third-party controls or anything that you've written which processes speech, you can embed that with Visual WebGui. Visual WebGui is basically ASP.NET, so anything you can do in terms of architecture with ASP.NET, you can do that with Visual WebGui. You may have to adjust it to Visual WebGui or write some custom handler for that, but I don't see why not. I don't see any architectural problem. Next question. Any development on SharePoint plugins? Not right now. Basically, SharePoint is not ASP.NET. If you want to develop for SharePoint, we mainly deal with ASP.NET. Visual WebGui is ASP.NET based, and for SharePoint, it's not the same arena. It's just like a parallel place. As when I said cloud, somebody asked, do you mean Azure? Of course, I mean Azure. Yes, Visual WebGui can be deployed to the Azure cloud as to the web. And actually, the first application that was deployed to the Azure cloud was a Visual WebGui application of a company called Advanced Telemetry, which I think involved energy measurements or something like that. Of course, you can deploy to Azure. We do have clients doing that right now. You also get Azure templates currently for cloud services, a version 1.2 for that, not .NET Framework 3.5, and version 1.4 for .NET 4. All right. Is your webinar recorded for future viewing? It is recorded. I hope that the recording is successful, and we will publish it on the web. Is the webmail application, it seems sluggish. Is there an issue? I don't know what exactly you're talking about, but I should mention that the first time you run it, firstly there's a small download time of the kernel of the resources. It's about 250K. That includes all the CSS files, JavaScript files, XSLT or JQT files. And other than that, since Visual WebGui is very rich in UI, so if you open a dialog for the first time, it downloads the images for the frame and everything just once, and then it's cached in the browser. So maybe that's what you meant. Okay, so just a second, please. Okay. Does an Azure scale greater than 2,000 users? For Azure and users, I would recommend running the assessment tool if you want to see what kind of resources you want. You do have a form you can fill out and see according to the common usages of your applications and what resources you need from the cloud. The greatest thing about Visual WebGui in the cloud, I should mention, is how Visual WebGui saves you on the cloud, because on the cloud you do pay for each resource. You pay for bandwidth, you pay for storage, you pay for database storage, and you pay for bus connections. And the bus connections usually go along with the user's question. And since Visual WebGui is very low on bandwidth and CPU and the state management, you can save a lot of money for your organization by deploying Visual WebGui to the cloud in regular ASP.NET. And I do have a slide for that I want to show you. Okay, just a second. Okay. So this is a graph showing performance evaluation of various platforms created by Microsoft MVP Victor Zilka. And you can see here the bandwidth consumption if you compare Visual WebGui with other methodologies and platforms. And you can see the bandwidth is very, very low. And also service level, which that means how many concurrent users and how many requests per second you have. Visual WebGui serves much better than everyone else. So just going to continue with the questions now. Okay. Any stats for runtime details? When you run our application, you can choose to see the debugger at the bottom. I've shown you this before. Through the project properties, you can choose it. And in this debugger, you can see, you can measure the runtime aspects. I mean, the time of the request, the time of the response. You can see references to stress levels and things like that. And of course, you can run tools that measure ASP.NET on Visual WebGui and measure for yourself. You'll be surprised. I've done this before. Okay. Did you do any stress testing if you have 5,000 people using on one server? I didn't say 5,000 people using on one server, but Visual WebGui is a very common product, and it's available in productions around the world, and companies from all segments of the market. You can see visual applications in banking and insurance and HMOs, in government, in security. So when you're talking about stress levels, you can see there are a lot of good examples. All right, is it SEC 508 compliant? How about W3C? Of course, Visual WebGui is W3C compliant, and that's another reason we chose to go with HTML5, because it is W3C compliant, which gives you the support of the browsers that you want to use. You can use all the main browsers: Safari, Opera, Firefox, Google Chrome, IE. You can use mobile browsers, and that's just because you are W3C compliant. On mobile, you run as a web application or a native code. Web application. This is on top of ASP.NET. So you run as a web application, and you can just browse to Visual WebGui applications through your mobile device right now. Only if it's not what I've shown you about the mobile sneak peek, you won't be able to see much, because data applications involve a lot of written data, and the screen is small. But absolutely, web applications, no plugins, no native code. If you want to write, customize your UI for a specific device, then you might want to write with native code. Any plans for rich VI self-service plugins on Visual WebGui? No. But one of the principles of Visual WebGui is no plugins and accessibility everywhere. And that's our main. It's one of our main mottos. That's what's so powerful about us. Can I port existing code into this product? Excellent question. Of course, it depends a lot of which code are you talking about. If you're talking about desktop code, client server, if of course you can migrate it, and you can check our migration tools. It's easier, of course, if you go from Windows Forms, because that's already .NET, and our API mimics a lot of the Windows Forms API, because when we started, that's what we've started from. And if you're talking about migrating from other desktop development like VB6, currently you can contact us, and we can deal with that as a project, as a service. You can use our assessment tools and see the effort that is required, and we can go from there. If you're talking about porting existing code from ASP.NET, then of course you can port it, but I would think that some of it will be easily ported, some of this will have to be rewritten. But the good thing is that you've seen how easy it is to develop with Visual WebGui. So recreating UI with Visual WebGui it's so easy compared to regular ASP.NET that it's a valid question, but I would go for that effort, because you do get not just the development benefits but the runtime as well. So I hope this answered your question. Is there a framework available to access native devices like accelerometer or GPS? Okay, Visual WebGui works very well with PhoneGap. It was tested, and more frameworks or more availability and support are, of course, planned in the future. As the time goes by, we support more and more and more, and people try more and more. And so far, it's been proven very successful. Who are your competitors? Basically, if we're talking about development of web applications, we are partners with Microsoft, with Visual Studio Group. But if you're talking about methodologies, you have ASP.NET development, you have JSP development, and the market is full of different paradigms. But I think what we've done when we came to be on top of ASP.NET, we develop on top of ASP.NET, you get the whole power of the development tools from .NET, from Microsoft. You get the power of the .NET libraries, which are very, very strong, and you get fully customizable and rich UI. So that is it. I think I hope I answered your question. Okay. Okay. Slideshow will be available either on demand after the starting tomorrow, or we'll put it on the web. We'll tell you, don't worry. Where are you based? We are based in Israel. The company is a small company. It's a little over 3 years old and based in Israel. How many customers do you have? I've answered this. Okay. Excuse me if I repeat some questions. I just filtering this as I speak. Any educational pricing? Well, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that, but if you're talking about the skills which you have to acquire in order to develop and deploy with Visual WebGui, just a second, please. Okay. I guess we're talking about pricing for educational establishments or institutions. You're welcome to go to our website, and we have detailed data there about pricing. You have tables and everything. And our sales department is at your service. Just contact us through the website. Thank you. How can .NET code work for Apple Android devices? Basically, Visual WebGui is drawing a UI. Actually, for Android, you can see the application that I've shown you before. Since it's a browser interpretation of HTML basically, so there's no problem to work for any device or any browser as long as it's W3C compliant. That's the standard that we go by. You can have mostly everything. Okay. Okay. Educational pricing. Yes, I've answered this. Okay. Okay. Educational. I hope I answered this. If you want to find out about pricing for educational institutions, whether for the staff or for the students, go to our website. You can see all the answers there. Okay. Okay, I want to implement our own paging style. How can we modify it? These screens are not easy to use. Default component is functional, but none of this work in IE8, right? Would have been nice if we'd been told to have another browser ready. I'm not sure what you've tried in IE8, and I want to understand what's not easy to use. So I don't know what you've been browsing. So just gonna check for a minute. Say I want to use. Where have you tried paging? Because when I've shown you the application, it doesn't involve any paging, so I don't exactly understand what you mean. So if you can just write a follow-up question or explanation, I will be able to answer you. Okay, just go here. Okay. Okay. As you see, the download time for the browser for each element is it's not much. Okay. I don't see any paging here in the web application, so please be more specific. I'll be happy to answer your question. Visual WebGui is supported in IE8, IE7. We do support IE7 and onwards, including IE9, Chrome versions up to 7, Firefox, all versions. Okay. What is the current browser compatibility of generated code? Browser compatibility. Generated code is HTML basically. So HTML, the compatibility is for all browsers, as I've mentioned, which support WCC, which are compliant with WCC standards of HTML. All main browsers are supported. Oops. All right. Okay. Will this slide collection and code samples be available for download? If you want, of course, I can supply the code samples on demand. We'll be in touch with you after the webinar, and everyone who's interested to see the code can ask for it. But I do want to point out that except for the pure HTML sample, which I've shown you, you do have to have Visual WebGui installed to open these projects, just so you'd be aware. Okay. Okay, I can see a question here. During the demo, you implement paging list view. Yes. What I've shown you, I don't know what you mean by sluggish. I'm just going to go back to my browser. And this is my list view as I've shown. And I don't know what you mean by sluggish. Just going to take off this debugger right here to refresh my page so you can see it better. So when I go to my list view and I select the internal paging mechanism, just a second, set to true, this is the paging, and you can see it is defined. There is a definition how many items you can show. Currently I think it's 24 items per page. You see here 20. I can set it to 10 and I get 8 pages instead of 4, and it's very, very fast. I don't know what you mean by sluggish. Oh, you mean by in IE, so sorry, let's check it in IE. Right here. I'm happy you asked that because I want to address that. Yeah, just a second. Yeah, something is about this. I think that's because that's in the .NET 4. Well, I'll check this and I'll get back to you on this. All right, so we go here. Okay. Do you support calendaring controls? Visual WebGui does have a bank of around 70 controls that you can take out of the box controls, such as what you've seen, the list view and the buttons and checkbox and everything. And that includes also a calendar control. And of course, which you can also extend and customize at your will. If you want to see the calendar control, I think you can find it in the companion kit and browse and see it. So definitely. Okay. Is Visual WebGui able to translate Silverlight applications too? If you want to deploy to Silverlight, you can with Visual WebGui. As a presentation layer, it was fully supported by Visual WebGui in the past. We have been providing client resources for Silverlight, but not in the current version. We centralize our efforts in HTML5 and not Silverlight as a platform. But of course, if you want to deploy, then I say it again. Visual WebGui, you develop once, deploy anywhere. So just adjust your custom client UI to work with Visual WebGui, and you're golden. We've done this before. You can see that on our website. You can see discussions about this. I urge you to go to the forum and see the discussions there and even participate. You will get a lot of data. Can I use my custom web controls which have already been developed? Basically you can. Visual WebGui is ASP.NET. And in that aspect, I have two answers and they're quite different. The first one is that Visual WebGui does have an integrated wrapper that you can use in Visual Studio. It's just basically a small tool which wraps ASP.NET controls and embeds them in the Visual WebGui form. You can see that on the page. You can bind to events, and that means that you can continue to work in the same methodology with that control, which means if you deal with scripting or the ASP.NET code. And the second one is that I would check if Visual WebGui answers my needs before I would go to transfer any outside controls into Visual WebGui. You may find that Visual WebGui answers the needs like your custom control or close to, and that gives you better performance. And if you want to, if you don't want to wrap your control, but just want to adjust it with Visual WebGui, you can mimic the same customization that you've done with Visual WebGui. You can see examples on our website, in our forums, and in our knowledge base for that. That's a very good question. It's a common one as well. Is there a download for the client? This is a question by Ken. Ken, if you meant, I don't know exactly what you meant, if you meant for the product, to download the product, or the client side in the deployment. I'm going to answer both. Client side, as I mentioned before, first time Visual WebGui runs on the browser. It downloads a kernel of the client resources, templates, style sheets, scripts, HTML. That's about 250K. After that, it's just images. And it's after the first time, it's very, very fast. If you're talking about our product, then of course, our product is distributed in a dual license mode, evaluation period, and the professional, and the express version. With the professional, you get an evaluation of 30 days, and you can download, use our code, try it out, play with it for a while, compare it to others, and after a month, you will have to purchase a license. And we do have the Express version. That's a free version for Visual Studio Express editions, Visual Web Developer Express. And with that, you get all the libraries, you get the designer, but you do not have the integration package, and the other features that you do not get with the Express version. But that's it could be a good solution depending on your needs. Okay. Actually, when we talked about the schedule, I see you're talking about the schedule control. Yes, I've answered you that we do have it, but if I go back to the web implementation, let's see if I have. No, we don't have here a scheduler, but we do have that control. So it is possible to work with a calendar control. It's called a schedule box. Monthly view, weekly, of course, everything. Okay, about the list view paging, I didn't fully understand your question. What do you mean I can change the style? With Visual WebGui, you can change. I'm going to show you. Actually, it's a good question. I'm glad you asked that. You can customize applicatively, which means I can go through see here in my browser, I can go through the properties of my list view and change them. I can do this in application level. And of course, I can customize the styles through skinning. So what I'm going to show you now, just for a second, just going to go to my application. You can see here I'm going to add a reference to our themes. Visual WebGui has a theming mechanism. You can create different themes for your application and from just customize the UI. Basically, this is a part that the graphic designer can do. You don't have to know how to program. And what you do, just going to add the reference one. We do have a few out-of-the-box themes, and I'm going to reference them now. You can see this here. And I'm just going to add them here in the registration tab. You can see here I can register my forms, my controls, and my themes. And I'm just going to add, say, a Facebook theme. And I'm going to select it. And when I build my application, go to my browser and I hit refresh. And you can see here it's the same thing. Nothing changes. Even the state stays the same. Just the UI changes. You can see my list view here. Okay, so this is something that's I've missed something in the web config because I did it quick and dirty. But you can see here, this is customization of my list view. And if I go to use internal paging, probably the paging navigator will look different. Yes, the images are different. So you can customize Visual WebGui not just by touching client code, but by replacing colors and images. And it's done. If you're interested, I'm just going to show you. I'm going to add a new item, and it's going to be a Visual WebGui theme item. Now once I've done this, I can open my theme designer, and you can see here, this is a great thing, I love this. You can see the whole hierarchy of the controls of Visual WebGui, and for each control you can access it and see the client resources. For instance, this is the button resources. These are all the images. You can see the focus top image, the focus to top hover style, and you can override anything that you want and open in any program that you want. Say I want to open say I have to make a lot of changes for this. Let's go for the checkbox. I can go to my checkbox and I can override an image. Just change the colors. I'm just going to say override, save, and you can see now there's a file now, and I can go and edit the file in the graphic designer of my choice. Save this. Actually, I don't like this one, so I'm just going to use another program. So I'm just going to open my folder here. And you can see the image right here. So I'm just going to open a program of my choice. Just a second. It's going to drag this in. And once I'm here, I can just color this. Say I want to choose a red color. And let's do something like this. Just going to save it and go back to my studio, and you can see it's changed right here. And if I go to my themes, I can add theme 1. I can select it and go to my browser, and you can see here my checkbox. You see? And I can do this for everything. I can do this for, if I go to my theme, I can change the font for the whole application. Just go to Control, because Control is above all the other controls in the hierarchy. Change the font to be something completely different. Say this one, bold italic 11. And when I build this, I should see all the fonts change. You see in the list view, in the checkbox, not in the label, because for the label I chose an applicative font. But all the default fonts have changed for the control. And you can create theming just like that. All right. I hope I answered your question. And actually the theming mechanism and capabilities are explored in other webinars with our graphic designer Doron, which designed complete themes, out-of-the-box themes for you to use for all the controls. And he doesn't know squat about development, just HTML basically. That's what he knows. That's the only relation he has to programming. Okay, so I hope I answered your question. Yes, okay. Okay. Okay, I see a lot of question about how you couldn't hear me when I started. Sorry about that. It was really hectic here. Okay. So this is it. Thank you all very much for coming. These are the links you can browse to our HTML5 demos, or go to our website and see the download page or the cloud solutions that we have, CloudMove, the migrations. And thank you very much for participating. It's been a pleasure for me. And I hope to see you all very much soon in our website and our community. If you have any further questions, you can contact us through our website. Our support team is at your disposal. and you can use forums, which are very active. And I wish you all good luck and good night.